Picture yourself 10,000 years ago, standing beside a tree after a storm. The fruit on the ground is soft. Some of it smells strange. You pick one up, you taste it, and suddenly humanity may have discovered alcohol. But here is the strange part. Humans did not invent fermentation. Yeast did, and yeast was making alcohol millions of years before humans existed. So when did our ancestors first start drinking it? The answer is older than farming, older than cities, possibly older than our own species. Alcohol appears naturally when yeast consumes sugar. Fruit provides sugar, yeast provides the chemistry, and time does the rest. A fallen fruit can ferment, nectar can ferment, honey can ferment, even tree sap can ferment. The result is a substance that can alter the brain, and humans are not the only animals attracted to it. Scientists have observed wild animals eating naturally fermented fruit. Birds eat overripe berries. Elephants seek fermented fruit. Primates sometimes consume alcohol-rich foods. This suggests something important. Our attraction to alcohol may not be purely cultural. It may have deep evolutionary roots. The idea is known as the drunken monkey hypothesis. Biologist Robert Dudley proposed it in 2000. His argument was surprisingly simple. Our primate ancestors may have evolved to notice the smell of ethanol. Ethanol can signal ripe, energy-rich fruit. In that world, smelling alcohol could mean finding calories. The reward came from the fruit. The alcohol was simply part of the package. So perhaps the first human drinkers were not looking for intoxication. They were looking for food. But when did humans deliberately make alcohol? That question is much harder. The archaeological record does not preserve ancient beverages very well. A broken stone tool can survive for thousands of years. A fermented drink usually cannot. So scientists look for clues. One of the most famous clues comes from China. At Jiahu, an ancient settlement in Henan province, researchers found something remarkable. The site dates to around 7000 BC. Inside ancient pottery were chemical traces of a fermented beverage. The drink appears to have contained rice. It also contained honey and fruit. The evidence suggests that people at Jiahu were making alcohol intentionally. That means humans were fermenting beverages at least 9,000 years ago. But this was not necessarily the beginning. It was simply the oldest strong evidence we have found. And that distinction matters. Archaeology is a record of what survives, not a complete record of everything humans did. So the true history of alcohol could stretch much further back, perhaps thousands of years further, maybe tens of thousands. The earliest evidence may have disappeared completely. Now imagine another place, the Fertile Crescent. Around 10,000 years ago, humans began changing their relationship with plants. They planted crops, they harvested grains, they settled in larger communities, and eventually they began producing more food than they needed immediately. This created a new possibility. Stored grain could become something else. Beer. The earliest beer may have been very different from the drink we know today. It could have been thick, cloudy, slightly sour, and filled with floating grains. But it was still fermented, and it may have been safer than some available water sources. That does not mean ancient people drank beer because they understood germs. They did not. But fermentation can inhibit some harmful microorganisms, and the process can make certain nutrients easier to absorb. So alcohol may have offered several advantages at once. Calories, flavor, social bonding, and possibly safer hydration. But there was another reason people may have valued it. Alcohol changes consciousness, and humans have always been fascinated by altered states. The oldest societies left evidence of feasting. They gathered, they ate, they drank, they celebrated, they mourned, they performed rituals. Alcohol could become part of all of these moments. At Göbekli Tepe, in modern Turkey, monumental structures appeared more than 11,000 years ago. The site is famous for challenging older ideas about how civilization began. Some researchers have suggested that feasting and communal gatherings played an important role there. The stone vessels found at the site have even raised questions about ancient brewing. But the evidence remains debated, and that uncertainty is important. Ancient history is rarely a clean story. It is a collection of clues. Some clues fit together, others refuse to cooperate. So perhaps alcohol did not create civilization, but civilization may have the alcohol much easier to produce. Once humans settled down, they could cultivate crops, they could store grain, they could build containers, they could control fermentation, and they could produce alcohol on purpose. This changes the story completely. The first accidental drink may have been a piece of fermented fruit. The first deliberate drink was something different. It required knowledge. Someone had to notice that a process was repeatable. Then someone had to do it again and again. That means ancient alcohol was also ancient technology. Fermentation is invisible. You cannot see yeast working with your eyes, but you can see the result. A sweet liquid changes, bubbles appear, the smell changes, the taste changes, and something new is created. Imagine discovering that without knowing what microbes were. That must have seemed almost magical. And humans kept experimenting. In Mesopotamia, beer became deeply connected to daily life. By the 3rd millennium BC, written records were documenting beer production and distribution. Some workers were even paid with beer. In ancient Egypt, beer was also a major part of society. It was consumed by ordinary people. It was associated with food, and it appeared in religious contexts. Wine followed a different path. Grapes naturally contain the perfect ingredients for fermentation: sugar, water, and yeast. Crush grapes? Wait. And nature does much of the work. The oldest known winery evidence comes from the Arini 1 cave in Armenia,
Researchers state the winemaking complex around 4900 BC. There they found the wine test.
Fermentation vessels and grape remains. This was not an accidental puddle of fermented fruit. This was organized production. People were making wine deliberately. They were pressing grapes, fermenting the juice, and storing the finished drink. By this point, alcohol had become part of human culture. But here is the deeper question. Why did humans keep making it? The answer may be partly biological, partly social, and partly psychological. Alcohol affects the brain by changing communication between neurons. It can reduce inhibition, it can alter mood, it can affect coordination, and at higher concentrations, it can seriously impair judgment. Ancient humans did not know this chemistry, but they knew the experience. They knew that drinking could make people behave differently, and that difference could be powerful. A feast became more intense, a ceremony became more dramatic, a celebration became unforgettable. A funeral could become a communal ritual. Alcohol could help people cross emotional boundaries, but it also created problems. The same substance that lowers fear can lower caution. The same drink that strengthens social bonds can produce conflict. The same chemical that creates pleasure can create dependence. Ancient societies noticed these effects too. They wrote laws, they created drinking customs, they warned against excess. The problem was never simply alcohol. The problem was what humans did with it. And that may explain why alcohol appears again and again throughout history. Humans are social animals. We create rituals, we seek pleasure, we alter our consciousness, and we constantly search for ways to connect with one another. Alcohol happens to fit into all four. But there is one final twist. The history of alcohol may not actually begin with humans. It may begin with evolution itself. Millions of years ago, primates were already encountering ethanol in nature. Our ancestors lived among fruit fermented. Animals that could detect ripe fruit had an advantage. So perhaps the human relationship with alcohol began long before humans understood what alcohol was, long before agriculture, long before pottery, long before the first city. Maybe the first drink was not a ceremony. Maybe it was not a celebration. Maybe it was simply a hungry animal eating fruit that had been sitting in the sun. And that tiny accident may have planted the seed for one of humanity's oldest traditions, from fermented fruit to ancient beer, from honey drinks to wine, from ritual feasts to modern bars. The technology changed, the containers changed, the cultures changed, but the chemistry stayed almost exactly the same. Yeast still eats sugar, fermentation still creates ethanol, and the human brain still responds to it. So when did ancient humans start drinking alcohol? The safest answer is this. We know humans were deliberately producing fermented drinks at least 9,000 years ago, but our relationship with alcohol may be far older, possibly as old as our attraction to ripe fruit itself. And that means the history of alcohol is not really the story of a drink. It is the story of a relationship between biology and culture. Nature created fermentation. Evolution created animals attracted to its clues. Humans discovered how to control it, and civilization turned it into tradition. The strangest part is that alcohol may have entered human history without anyone inventing it. Nature made the first drink. Humans simply learned how to make it happen on purpose. And perhaps that is why alcohol has survived for thousands of years. We didn't create the desire for it. We inherited the instinct. Then we built a civilization around it.